This week on Wednesday, surveyors were on the Temple Mount itself in Jerusalem, taking careful measurements. What in the world were they doing? What were they measuring? Were they preparing for the setting up of the altar for sacrifices, maybe even this Passover, or maybe even the third temple? That's what this update is about today, and we're starting right now. The first question is, why wasn't Google Maps utilized? Google Maps, is a very safe, simple, cheap method to measure and plan for projects where exact precision measurements aren't needed. For instance, some suggested online that the survey was to plan for social distancing given the rise in COVID-19. Well, that could easily be done with Google Maps. So instead, this has to be related to something that needs precise measurements, to the inch precision. Maybe construction projects. Second, who were these surveyors? They were reported to be Israeli police surveyors, and police in uniform are seen in some of the pictures. So that rules out a Muslim construction project. It was an authorized government survey. So we know it was a precise survey and one authorized by the Israeli government itself. Well, what about some other type of construction project? You may have heard that the Jewish group is trying to have a synagogue built on the Temple Mount. Well, interestingly, Israel 360 News had a live stream today that I watched with the head of that very group. And guess what? He didn't know what the surveyors were measuring, so it wasn't that either. What is also interesting is there has been no official statement on the purpose of these surveyors. If it was completely non-controversial, then why no report? Especially because all Jerusalem is buzzing and knows that this took place. And there was given me a reed like a rod, and the angel stood saying, "Rise, and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein." This was that kind of measurement, except of course not by angels. What are the two items mentioned in this verse? The altar and the temple. So it is possible it relates to one or both of these things. On the same day the survey took place, we released this video on how Israel is preparing a Passover sacrifice on the Temple Mount to attempt to stop the pandemic. Talk about perfect timing. This video discusses the idea of sacrifices in detail. If you don't think Muslims might agree that a sacrifice like this is needed, or if you think that a third temple is necessary before the sacrifices, you really need to click in the upper right and watch this video. It answers all these questions for you. So let's say this survey was to prepare a spot for the Passover sacrifice on the Temple Mount, the first one in nearly 1950 years. Why would they need a surveyor? Because, as we proved in that previous video, the Jews do not believe they need a temple to do sacrifices. They don't even think they need the ashes of a red heifer to do them. But they do believe they need to do them in the exact right spot where the original altar was, the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And the position of the altar is exactly given in the Mishnah, the rabbinic teaching. Architect and archaeologist Lean Rittmeyer surveyed the Temple Mount back in the 1970s and found this exact spot. Click on the upper right again to see another video that's on this subject. But that was in the 1970s, and a lot has changed on the Temple Mount since then. So it would make sense for police surveyors who are impartial to conduct a survey to find that spot. In addition to the police surveyors being somewhat impartial in the matter, the area where the original temple stood is holy ground to Orthodox Jews. So although they believe they don't need the ashes of a red heifer to do a sacrifice, they do believe they need the ashes to be ritually pure enough to even stand on the holy ground closer to the Dome of the Rock. So Temple Institute surveyors would have been unwilling to do the survey. Interestingly, all the surveyors but one had on rubber-soled tennis shoes. Now, why is that important? Well, leather shoes made from the skin of a dead animal would profane the holy site. Now, according to Rittmeyer, the altar was about 80 feet east of the Dome of the Rock. And as you can see in this picture, that is exactly where the surveyors are measuring. Some of them appear to be using Matport 360 cameras to visualize and record the spot as well. But what about measuring for a third temple? Well, considering the Dome of the Rock is still standing, at least it was yesterday, it makes no sense for them to measure now. Jewish authorities believe any new temple needs to be placed in the exact location where the dome currently stands. It makes a lot more sense that the survey was in order for sacrifices to begin. That could happen as soon as March with the portable altar the Jews already have. It can be rolled right into place. But a temple, that would be a much longer term project. So I think all Christians should be carefully watching for a Passover sacrifice on the Temple Mount, which could be a very significant end-time event. Sacrifices have to start before the Antichrist can take them away at the midpoint of a 70th week. Now, it's also possible that the surveyors had a completely different purpose on the Temple Mount. Hidden passageways to underground structures were found on the Temple Mount earlier this year. Click right here to continue to watch and learn about what these hidden bricked-over passages might lead to. Until then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.